Hey, today I want to take you on a different journey. One that strays from the glamorous images and epic tales we usually see about the Middle Ages. No impeccable golden castles or noble kings with their shining horses and gleaming swords. Nope. Today, we'll explore the other side of the coin, the raw, real, and sometimes quite dark side of those men who ruled with absolute power, but who, far from the court and the cameras of history, carried secrets far more human than we imagine. Just imagine you're about to enter a time when life wasn't measured by comfort or morality, but by strength, cunning, of course, those deepest, most intense impulses that are part of being human. I'm talking about kings who not only commanded vast armies and territory, but also allowed themselves to be dominated by forbidden desires and pleasures, often hidden from the eyes of the people, hidden even from the very history we insist on remembering. Hello, welcome. Before we begin this story, how about you settle in where you are, close your eyes for a moment, and take a deep breath. I want to know, where are you listening to me from right now? What time is it there for you? Leave a comment. I'd love to hear it. Now, allow yourself to completely relax, disconnecting from the outside world for a moment. Prepare your surroundings for a peaceful journey, because we'll dive together into a story full of mysteries and secrets that will gently guide you to rest. Take another deep breath. Let's get started. Now, I invite you to open your mind and heart to this reality. Let's put aside fantasy and look at the facts, at what really happened in the dark hall, in the cold corridors of fortresses, where decisions that changed the fate of nations were made while shadows and whispers fill the air. What we will discover together are not just stories of power, but tales of vice, betrayal, and unbridled passion that shape, for better or worse, the paths of humanity. It's not about judging, but about understanding, about feeling the complexity of that world and those men who, despite their majesty, were deeply human, with their weakness, fears, and intense desires. As you listen, allow yourself to relax. Imagine yourself entering these ancient spaces, feeling the muffled sounds of a bustling court, the heavy footsteps on the cold stones, the murmur of conversation, and perhaps even the smell mixture of incense, sweat, and decay. Let these images fill your mind, transporting you to a time that seems distant, but which, in many ways, still resonates within us. If you find yourself curious, or even surprised along this journey, I'd love to hear about it. Don't forget that you can leave a comment here, tell me where you're listening from, and of course, if you enjoy these stories, give me a like and subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring the lesser-known sides of history together. Get ready, because the journey is about to begin together. We'll uncover the secrets and contradictions of the most perverted kings in medieval history and, who knows, perhaps learn a little more about the human nature behind the crowns and castle. Waking up in a medieval castle was a very different ritual from our routine today, and I imagine that when you close your eyes, you can feel the difference that mix between the cold of the stone and the muffled heat of the torches, the dense smell of the fire burning in the hearth, and a heavy air, impregnated with centuries of story, secrets, and whispers that echo between the thick, rough wall. In the silence of the morning, which was often not so silent, there was the awakening of tired bodies, weighed down by thick clothes and rough linen sheets, which barely protected against the cold that seemed to permeate everything. The bed, far from being a soft embrace, was a hard board scattered with dried straw or feathers, not comfortable for the tired skin of king, but sufficient for a brief rest between endless days of responsibility. You'd feel the stiffness in your muscle, remembering the exhaustion of the previous night, perhaps of parties where the wine flowed freely and pleasures knew no bound, or of the worries that prevented a peaceful sleep, a mind that never rested while the kingdom needed its vigilance. Your body would awaken slowly, as if waking from a heavy dream, and the silence round you seemed almost sacred, broken only by the creaking of the floorboards or the distant sound of the rooster announcing the beginning of a new day. The smell that filled the room was a strange, almost suffocating mix, The strong scent of incense burning to purify the air mingled with the odor of sweat, dirty skin, animal skins hanging on the wall, of course. The constant smoke from the fire that warmed and cooked. It was a heavy, almost palpable aroma that brought a sense of raw, real life, without the softness we now associate with comfort. Upon opening his eyes, the light streaming through the small, narrow windows was dim, filtered by the thick curtains and the mist that often shrouded the exterior outside. A world of stone and wood-loomed tall towers, strong wall, but also shadows that stretched across the courtyards and corridors, where every step could carry a threat or a secret. The castle was at once a refuge and a prison, a place where security was guaranteed by the wall, but freedom was limited by the weight of royalty. Sitting up in bed was an effort. My body ached, remembering the many years of battle, parties, and responsibility. The weight of the crown seemed invisible but incessant, pressing down on my mind and spirit. Getting up meant accepting the relentless routine of that day, which forgave no weakness. As the servants began their tasks, lighting more torches, preparing a simple breakfast, bringing in heavy clothing, the room began to come alive, but still maintained that high, almost contemplative atmosphere. Sounds were muffled, hurried footsteps, the clink of cutlery, whispered voices far from the main corridors. The cold wasn't just a physical sensation, but a constant presence that shaped the day. The castle stones absorbed the morning humidity, and the biting wind found gaps, doors and windows, sending the frigid air rushing throughout. Heavy clothing and furs were the only defense against the discomfort, but they didn't eliminate it entirely. In this scenario, the king began to prepare himself, donning heavy armor or formal clothing, depending on the engagement, carrying the weight of power that, at that moment, seemed like a cold and uncomfortable cloak, very different from the glitter and pomp of the story. Waking up in the castle was, above all, accepting stark reality, luxury and discomfort, power and solitude, majesty and fragility. As you imagine this scene, try to feel the environment around you, the sounds, the smells, the sensations that filled each moment. Let this image gently envelop you, transporting you to a distant yet real world, where each awakening was the beginning of a challenge and where kings, despite their crown, were as human as we are. The day truly began when the first sunlight penetrated the thick stone walls of the castle or fortress, casting on faint shadows along the cold, silent corridors. The morning silence was merely an invitation for the inhabitants of that medieval world to face another arduous cycle, filled with tasks that, for many, meant a constant struggle against nature and their own bodies. Physical labor began early, long before the comfortable hours we know today. In the royal chambers, where the beds were softer, waking still meant facing stiff muscles and the heavy feeling of a body already tested by nights of vigil, feasting, or worry. For those outside the privileged circle, this routine was even more relentless. Peasant, soldiers, servants, all of them had to rise at the first sign of dawn, prepared to face the weight of the day. Imagine walking through the hallway, wearing heavy layers of fabric, often damp from the previous night's dew or rain, feeling the cold penetrate your bones. The biting wind, which seemed to dig into your skin, was a constant reminder of the harshness of those times, where the warmth of a fire was a luxury reserved for a few moments. Outside, the fields awaited workers who needed to prepare the land for planting or tend livestock, tasks that required constant effort, strong muscles, and an endurance that only necessity could build. There were no machines or modern facilities. Everything depended on human labor and the help of animals. The sun, which seemed benevolent during the summer, actually burned the skin and drained strength, while in winter it transformed into an invisible enemy, bringing extreme cold and making any outdoor activity difficult. Clothing, though heavy, offered insufficient protection against the harsh weather and storms. Blizzards and icy winds tested the physical and mental endurance of those who survived in this environment. Inside the castle, the routine was no less demanding. Servants scurried to meet the court's demands. Cooks prepared simple meals that needed to feed many mouths. The food, though sufficient to sustain strength, was repetitive, stale bread, thin stews, seasonal. Vegetables, for the more fortunate, salted or smoked meat that retained its flavor and energy for the next challenge. For kings and nobles, even surrounded by luxury, routine was often divided between meeting, audiences, and formal ceremonies, but also between excesses, banquets where the wine flowed and temptations multiplied, while the body paid the price for the choices made. The rudimentary medicine of the time could do little to alleviate the constant pain that afflicted so many, from poorly healed wounds to illnesses that would be easily treated today. Life was, above all, a series of physical challenges that demanded courage and an often silent inner strength. As the day wore on, fatigue increased, but the routine never stopped. There was always something to be done, a problem to solve, a threat to face, a decision to make. Rest was a rare treat, reserved for the most scarce moments between obligations. Now imagine yourself in this scene, breathing heavily, sweat dripping down your forehead, your body tired, but your mind alert, ever alert. This was the rhythm of medieval life, a rhythm marked by incessant effort, the struggle against adverse conditions, and the constant need to adapt. And even with so much difficulty, there was a quiet beauty in this routine, the simplicity of the gestures, the human warmth in the small exchanges between the inhabitants, the feeling of belonging to a community that, despite the challenge, remained united in survival. As you listen, allow these images to slowly form, like a gentle, steady film that draws you into this distant world, inviting relaxation and contemplation of the silent entrance of those who lived in times so different from our own. Imagine, for a moment, that you are waking up in the heart of the Middle Ages, in an environment where life is a constant struggle, where the simple act of getting out of bed is the beginning of a struggle against your own body and the world round you. The first light of day is still timid, and the chill of dawn insists on lingering, penetrating the thick stone walls of the house or castle where you rest. The bed where you sleep is hard, made of wood and straw, covered only by rough, rustic blanket. Your sleep was not deep, as your body bears the signs of the accumulated fatigue of the previous day's muscle aches, bruises, a constant feeling of stiffness. Opening your eyes, you notice the almost absolute silence. There's no comfort from modern appliances or controlled heat, but rather the stillness of nature still asleep, punctuated only by occasional sounds, the crackling of the fire in the fireplace, the timid chirping of birds in the distance, the creaking of the floorboards under the weight of the house. You feel the cold air seeping through the cracks in the door and small windows, a chilly breeze that almost seems to touch your bone. When you get up, your body protests with every movement, as if every muscle needs an extra moment to wake up. The routine begins early, long before the sun fully rises. The day will require strength, endurance, and perseverance. There's no luxury or comfort to ease the work that awaits you. Stepping outside, you encounter a scene from medieval life, a harsh, often hostile environment where nature dictates its own rule. The cold wind blows hard, dragging grey clouds promising rain, and the ground beneath your feet is wet and muddy, remnants of the previous night. The vegetation is dense, and the terrain is uneven, requiring careful attention to every step to avoid slipping or tripping. The first minutes of the day are consumed by preparing for work. Dressing in heavy wool or linen clothing, often damp, hinders movement and increases the weight on a tired body. Adjusting stiff leather boots, once comfortable but now more protective than comfortable, is key. Tying on the belt that holds the knife and other utensils, which will be indispensable tools for what lies ahead. Morning food is simple, almost always the same: a piece of stale bread, perhaps some cheese or seasonal fruit, accompanied by an herbal tea to warm the body. There's none of the varied aromas or exquisite flavors we know today. Everything is functional, designed to maintain strength and the minimum energy needed for the arduous day. Each bite is savored with gratitude, for hunger is a constant companion. As you head to the fields or the workshop, your body already feels the impact of the physical exertion. Your breathing quickens and sweat slowly trickles down your face, even in the cold. The work is hard, plowing the land with rudimentary tools, tending animals, carrying loads, chopping wood, or building structures. There's no pause for long rest. As the day is short and the tasks are many, the sun, slowly rising in the sky, casts yellowish light. But it doesn't bring enough warmth to dispel the constant feeling of cold that haunts the workers. On summer days, the heat can be oppressive, causing the skin to burn under prolonged exposure, leading to exhaustion and thirst. In winter, the cold is biting, freezing the fingers and hampering movement. Making every action slow and more painful, the routine repeats itself day after day, month after month, year after year, in a seemingly endless sequence. The sense of monotony is broken only by the cycles of nature, the seasons that determine what should be planted, harvested, stored, or cared for. Each phase brings its own challenges, and survival depends on respecting and adapting to these rhythms. Food, though simple, is a crucial part of this existence. Meals are made with local ingredients, often grown on the land itself or obtained through barter and scarce trade. Soups and stews are made with vegetables, grain, roots, when possible, a little salted meat or dried fish. Meals are more than moments of pleasure. They are a vital necessity for maintaining strength. Water, the source of life, is obtained from wells or nearby rivers, often contaminated, which makes health precarious and opens the way for rapidly spreading diseases. Hygiene care is limited, as bathing was rare, and cleanliness depended on available resources and the knowledge of the time. In this scenario, work is not just a means of survival, but a daily ritual of coping and resilience. The connection with the land is profound, and physical exertion is both a punishment and a blessing, a cycle that ensures the continuity of life and community. At dusk, the exhausted body returns to the shelter, where rest is brief and often interrupted by worries, sounds of nature, or tasks that still need to be done. The warmth of the fire in the fireplace brings comfort, but it doesn't erase the accumulated fatigue. Before bed, families gather to share what little they have, story, hopes, and dreams that nourish the soul, even amidst hardship. Night brings silence and darkness, an invitation to rest and renewal to face another day. As you listen, allow this gentle narrative to transport you to this ancient world, sensing the harshness and beauty of this daily routine. Let the calm voice and gentle words soothe your mind, preparing you for a journey of rest and contemplation. When thinking about medieval life, it's easy to imagine imposing castles, valiant knights, and just kings ruling wisely. But behind the heavy curtains and cold stone walls, lay a much more complex and often dark world. The halls where torches cast their dancing flames witnessed not only important political decisions, but also secret encounters, forbidden pleasures, and intrigues that could topple entire kingdoms. It is in this setting that I invite you to lose yourself for a few moments, imagining the palace atmosphere, where kings and nobles not only ruled, but also indulged their hidden desires, in parties that went beyond what official history dares to reveal. These so-called leisure moments were often the stage for orgies disguised as celebration, where wine flowed freely, laughter echoed through the corridors, and social rules became mere details. These parties, far from being mere distractions, played an important role in the dynamics of power. Their alliances formed and dissolved, intrigues gained momentum, and betrayals became inevitable. The court was a chessboard where every move needed to be carefully calculated, for a wrong word, misinterpreted look, could seal fates. As the flickering candlelight illuminated faces masked with smiles and secret, the atmosphere was charged with an almost palpable tension. Those present knew they were there for more than just celebration. Many came seeking favors, others to display power, and some to hide the loneliness of their public life. Women, often seen merely as objects or pawns in this case, had their own roles, sometimes as lovers chosen to please kings and nobles, sometimes figures of influence, able to manipulate important decisions through their connections and shared secrets. A woman's position at court could be as fragile as it was powerful, and her survival depended on her ability to navigate these treacherous waters. Amid the murmurs and sighs, rumors spread quickly. A furtive kiss here, a forbidden alliance there, everything was observed and commented on. often with devastating consequences. Scandal was a constant threat, and the need to maintain appearances forced the creation of a complex web of lies and silence. For kings, these moments were an escape valve, a way to forget, even temporarily, the burdens of the crown. However, the price of these indulgences was high. Scandals could weaken their prestige, fuel enemies, and even provoke revolt. Even so, the pursuit of pleasure and power often overrode prudence. With this in mind, it's fascinating to reflect on how these clandestine encounters shaped history. A king's movements in bed could influence the fate of nations, and alliances formed amid lust could decide wars. The line between private and public life was blurred, and the medieval court pulsed with an energy that transcended the obvious. As you hear these words, imagine the scene, the clinking of glasses, muffled laughter, candlelight casting dancing shadows on the stone wall. Feel the human warmth, the low voices, the gazes that hide secret. Let yourself be enveloped by this atmosphere, both gentle and intense, which reveal the side of the story as human as it is surprising. When imagining the Middle Ages, many imagine bloody battles, imposing castles, and powerful. But the lives of those who actually lived through that era were permeated by invisible threats, as feared as enemy armies. Among them was diseases that carried with them not only physical suffering, but also fear, superstition, and stigma. One of these shadows that loomed over the court and the population was syphilis, a disease we now recognize as serious, but which at the time was seen as divine punishment, a curse that could ruin kingdoms and hearts. Imagine, for a moment, the scene inside the castle, the heavy, humid air, the distant sound of hurried footsteps, the irregular breathing of someone suffering in secret. The patient is isolated, not only as a medical precaution, but because the disease was feared, misunderstood, and its sufferer often condemned to silence and solitude. The marks of syphilis, deep pains, and physical changes were not just signs of an illness, but symbols of shame, of a guilt that was attributed not to the disease, but to the person who carried it. In those days, medicine was still in its infancy, based more on tradition, religion, and limited observation than on the science we know today. Treatments were rudimentary, often worse than the disease itself. Bloodletting, herbal baths, and mysterious ointments were administered without a real understanding of their effect, and court physicians, however dedicated, had little to offer beyond comfort and prayers. And what about the impact of this disease among kings? Syphilis respected neither the crown nor royal blood. Many monarchs, even powerful ones, fell victim to its devastating effect. Their strength sapped not only physically, but also mentally and spiritually. Physical decline was accompanied by isolation, paranoia, and loss of authority, as subjects feared a leader who displayed such blatant signs of weakness. Hearing this, imagine what it would be like to live with this secret, amidst a court where rumors flowed as quickly as wine. Paranoia could spread, advisors would withdraw, and enemies would approach, waiting for the right moment to deliver the final blow. The disease transformed the king, not only physically, but also in the perception of his allies and adversaries. Besides syphilis, other diseases also haunted the medieval population: plague, tuberculosis, and many others that sound like distant words today, but which at that time were synonymous with almost certainty. The constant fear of these illnesses shaped behavior and influenced political acts, even religious decisions. They were often attributed to divine punishment, which further increased the stigma against those afflicted. Amidst all this, human willpower and resilience shone quietly. People cared for one another, sought help, and supported one another, even with limited knowledge and resources. And although medicine was precarious, efforts to alleviate suffering were real and often moving. As you listen to this story, allow the gentleness of the words to envelop you, even when faced with difficult topics. Imagine the weight of silence, the invisible struggle against the evil that grows, and the gentle touch of a helping hand that brings a little comfort in the darkness. When imagining the medieval court, it's impossible not to conjure images of rich tapestry, candle chandeliers, elaborate gowns, and tables laden with food and drink that awaken the senses. However, Behind this apparent brilliance lay a world where luxury and decadence coexisted side by side, creating a unique atmosphere marked by profound contrasts and aromas that tell silent story. Upon opening one's eyes in a royal chamber, the first sensations are tactile and olfactory. The texture of velvet beneath the fingers, the weight of gold and precious stone, the softness of the fine fabrics enveloping the body are at once comforts and reminders of the power that resides there. But the air, permeated by a dense, sometimes almost suffocating, scent, reveals another side of this opulent, accumulated sweat. The overly heavy perfume used to mask less pleasant odors. They are laden with mingled fragrances that are not always sweet. Medicine at the time had not yet grasped the importance of hygiene, and regular bathing was rare, especially among nobles who feared that water might weaken or sicken them. Thus, to combat the body's natural odor, strong perfumes were used, often composed of mixtures of herbs, flowers, spices, and substances that would seem strange to us today, but which at the time symbolized status and cleanliness. These aromas, however, blended with the castle's enclosed, poorly ventilated environment. The heavy air, combined with the flickering candle flames, created an almost palpable atmosphere, where the senses were entangled between pleasure and discomfort. It was a perfume of decadence, a silent invitation to explore the excesses and contradictions of that world. At court parties, aromas abounded. The strong smell of spilled wine, the perfume of flowers brought from the gardens, the smoke of incense. Unfortunately, the odor of bodies dancing, whispering, and indulging in forbidden pleasures. The perfume and smell of the court were, therefore, silent witnesses to a reality where outward beauty attempted to hide imperfections and secrets. Imagine yourself walking through the castle corridors, inhaling this blend of scents, while observing faces marked by weariness and indulgence. Each perfume was a mask, each aroma an untold story, a secret hidden behind smiles and glances. Decadence sometimes hid in fragrances that seduced and deceived. In this environment, luxury was not just a matter of appearance, but a tool of power and control. The use of expensive perfume and elaborate clothing distinguished the nobility from the common people, reinforcing hierarchies and social separation. But at the same time, this ostentation served to hide vulnerabilities and frailty, such as the fear of disease, physical exhaustion, and constant intrigue. As you listen to these words, allow yourself to imagine this blend of sensations: the warmth of the room, the intense perfume, the soft light dancing on the wall. Let this atmosphere envelop you, bringing a sense of relaxation even in the face of the contrasts and challenges of that time. The presence of women in the medieval court is something that, when viewed through contemporary eyes, may seem simple or even underestimated, but in truth, these women carried within them a complexity that went far beyond appearances and the role assigned to them. To truly immerse yourself in this universe, I invite you to put yourself in the shoes of a court lady for a moment, feeling the weight of elegance and expectation in every step taken on the cold stone floor, under the watchful and often judgmental gaze of those who shared the same space. The hall was always filled with low voices, whispers of secret, and glances that spoke more than words could ever express. In that world, feminine power was not displayed aloud, but manifested in subtle gestures, hidden influence, and the delicate art of silent diplomacy. Women, dressed in luxurious, shimmering, and heavy fabrics, carried on their shoulders the responsibility of maintaining alliances, preserving family honor at time, wielding the invisible threads that moved the fate of kingdoms. But this life, full of apparent pomp, was also a delicate balancing act between strength and vulnerability. Often, these women were key players in political intrigues, sent as wives to other territories to seal deals, or maintaining discreet relationships that could make or break their position. A woman's role at court could be both that of queen and that of instrument, a fine line that required intelligence, patience, above all, quiet grit. As she walked the hallways, she felt the weight of stares, the pressure of expectations, and the constant challenge of being heard in an environment dominated by male voices. The key was knowing when to speak, what to say, most importantly, when to remain so. Every gesture could be interpreted in multiple ways, and a misplaced word could trigger consequences far beyond anyone could imagine. Beyond the intrigue, there were also moments of fraternity, those rare and precious moments where women gathered, exchanged confidence, and shared dreams and fears. It was a space of relief and resilience, where strength was renewed to face the next day, which would bring new battles silent, but no less intense. The health and safety of these women were also a constant concern, as the risk of illness, pregnancy, and miscarriage was high, and medical resources were limited. Many faced unseen pain and sacrifice, endured in silence, with the same dignity demanded of them. As you listen to these words, let the gentleness of the narrative envelop your senses. Imagine the heavy dresses, the delicate touch of hand, the restrained sparkle of eyes carrying untold stories. Feel the atmosphere of these halls, where the scent of flowers mingles with the weight of secrets and responsibility. Allow yourself to delve into this story, recognizing the complexity and depth of women's role in the medieval court, a rule that, despite the limitations imposed by time, was essential to the survival and prosperity of dynasties and kingdoms. Life in the Middle Ages, especially within the rigid and somber walls of castles and palaces, was deeply marked by a complex web of beliefs, tradition, and social norms that intertwined with the daily actions of its inhabitants. Cultural and religious conflicts were not merely topics of distant discussion, but living forces that shaped behavior, defined alliances, and dictated the limits of what was acceptable, both in public and private. Sit with me for a moment, close your eyes, and imagine the medieval world round you. We are in an ancient village, where the streets are narrow and dirt, the houses simple, made of wood, stone. The air is cold and heavy, mingling the smell of smoke from the fireplaces with the strong aroma of wet earth and animals roaming freely. It is late afternoon, and the golden light of the setting sun touches the weathered walls of the house, casting long shadows that stretch down the silent alley. Life here is not easy, and even the simplest moments are woven with the threads of survival. Interactions between people are intense and complex, marked by the need for unity, but also by deep tensions and fears. Among these residents, phases marked by the hardship of work, hunger, and suffering reflect untold stories of strength and fragility, of hope and despair. Violence is present in many aspects of this daily life, not only in distant battles or wars, but in the small disputes that rise from hardship and scarcity. The weight of the law often falls on the weakest, while the strongest use force to secure their interests. In stuffy taverns and bustling squares, fights erupt with the swiftness of a spark, resulting in physical injuries and resentments that last for. This violence is more than simple aggression. It reflects a world where justice is unstable, and survival depends as much on strength as luck. Conflicts rise from trivial matters, a misplaced word, an offensive look, a dispute over food or space. But their impact is profound, as each wound and each resentment fuels a cycle that threatens the peace of the entire community. However, physical violence is not the only danger that threatens these people. Diseases, invisible and merciless, are perhaps the greatest enemies of medieval life. Plague, tuberculosis, respiratory infections, and many other illnesses claim lives with frightening speed. Limited medical knowledge and poor hygiene conditions turn a simple wound into a death sentence, and a passing fever into a collective disaster. The perception of illness is not limited to the physical body. The mind and spirit also suffer. Sanity, in that context, is a fragile concept, still shrouded in mystery and superstition. Madness is viewed with fear, often attributed to evil forces or divine punishment. Those suffering from mental illness are often isolated, abandoned to their own devices, victims of a system that barely understands or accepts invisible suffering. In this environment, community support is vital, but it can also be a double-edged sword. Solidarity exists, manifested in small gestures of mutual assistance, but fear and distrust permeate relationships, making each interaction a delicate dance between empathy and self-protection. Survival depends on the balance between these. extremes, and people learn early to navigate this complexity. Festivals and celebration, when they occur, are precious moments of relief and connection. On these occasions, residents gather to sing, dance, share stories, and renew bonds. These are moments when pain becomes more bearable, and hope, however faint, shines like a soft flame amidst the darkness. As the night progresses, silence returns to the streets, broken only by the whisper of the wind and the distant sounds of animals. The starry sky covers the village, offering a spectacle that changes little but inspires dreams and reflection. In the warmth of their home, families retreat, seeking comfort in each other's arms and the comfort of small things. As you listen, allow this description to envelop you, allowing you to feel the texture of medieval life with its mix of harshness and beauty. Imagine the faces, the voices, the smells, and the sounds, and let this gentle immersion lead you to a state of peace and contemplation. Imagine yourself in a cold morning, walking through the silent corridors of a castle that bears the marks of generation, where every stone seems to whisper ancient stories. The atmosphere is charged not only with the aroma of incense and smoke from the fireplace, but also with the invisible tension caused by differences that went beyond political borders. Difference cut deep into the souls and hearts of those who lived under the same roof, yet belonged to distinct spiritual and cultural worlds. Religion, in those times, was not just a matter of individual faith. It was the pillar that supported the entire social and political order. The Catholic Church dominated people's lives with near absolute authority, and its doctrines permeated every aspect of existence. Norms regarding morality, conduct, dress, and even intimate relationships were strictly regulated, and deviation from these rules could lead to severe punishment, including ostracism, imprisonment, or even death. But the courts were not homogeneous. In territories where different cultures met, whether Jewish, Muslim, Orthodox Christian, or remnant pagan coexistence, was marked by constant tension. The clash of beliefs and traditions created a scenario where suspicion and fear often overcame understanding and tolerance. These conflicts manifested themselves in small acts: a suspicious look, a veiled comment, a religious practice observed with hostility. Within this context, the behavior of kings and nobles was carefully calculated to maintain peace, but also to assert power. Marriage alliances with families of other faiths were often made not out of affinity but out of strategy, creating delicate relationships that required skill and prudence. The balance was fragile, and a slip could ignite religious disputes that devastated entire communities. Furthermore, the role of religion in everyday life directly influenced attitudes towards sexuality, pleasure, and human relationships. The body was seen as a temple to be controlled and purified, and desires were considered dangerous and needed to be guarded. Practices considered deviant were not only condemned but persecuted, fueling a climate of fear that extended to the most intimate circles of the court. At the same time, there was the reality of human nature, which resisted these impositions. Within the castle walls, secrets were hidden, desires were silenced, and, at times, challenged. Religion, despite its power, could not quench the passions that boiled in the hearts and minds of those who, under the weight of expectation, sought moments of relief and expression. As you allow yourself to be enveloped by these images and sensations, imagine the contrast between the silence of temples and the murmur of private celebration, between the solemnity of rituals and the intensity of hidden emotion. This duality shaped not only behavior, but the very essence of medieval life. Allow yourself to feel the complexity of this time, where faith and conflict, love and repression, power and vulnerability coexisted in a way as delicate as it was inevitable. Let the softness of the voice and the calmness of the words guide you through this journey, revealing the hidden layers that defined behaviors and shaped destiny. As I enter that ancient space, I imagine the strong, distinctive scent of dried herb, mixed with the aroma of melted candle wax, and the cold touch of the stone supporting the walls of the small room. This was the space where medieval medicine attempted, with limited resources and rudimentary knowledge, to alleviate pain and save lives amidst an often cruel and uncertain reality. Sitting beside a simple bed where a patient rested, marked by suffering, I felt the delicacy and tension in every gesture of the healer or doctor, a figure who, despite his limited knowledge, carried in his hands the weight of hope and the risk of failure. The instruments, simple and sometimes frightening, we used with a care that blended faith, experience, and the will to combat the invisible ills that ravaged the human body. Medical practices of that era were deeply intertwined with spiritual beliefs. Body and soul were seen as inseparable, and physical treatment was often accompanied by prayers, ritual, and the use of amulets to ward off evil. The line between scientific knowledge and mysticism was tenuous, and medicine moved slowly toward understanding what we now know as cure and prevention. In the hands of the medieval physician, every wound, every fever was a challenge. Bloodletting, herbal poultices, infusions, and hot baths made up the arsenal available. But treatments were often nothing more than instinctive attempts at dealing with illnesses that time and scientific advancement could not yet explain. The risk of infection, worsening, and even death itself was a constant, a silent companion in the bedsides of thousands. As I observe this scene, I feel the contrast between the fragility of the sick body and the strength of hope that drove those caring for him. Medicine, even with its limits, was an act of courage, a gesture of humanity amidst adversity. The silence of the room, broken only by sighs and murmurs, reflects the delicate balance between life and death, between pain and relief. Mortality, there, was a present and feared thing. Every day, entire families faced loss, often without the comfort of knowledge or certainty. Death came swiftly, mercilessly, leaving a void that few could fill. Yet, even in the face of this reality, human persistence flourished, creating networks of care, solidarity, and faith that transcended suffering. As you listen to this narrative, imagine the subtle warmth of healing hand, the aroma of carefully prepared plan, the restrained glow of eyes searching for a miracle in the darkness. Let these images slowly form, like a gentle dance of light and shadow, inviting relaxation and reflection on the incredible resilience of humankind. Sit with me, take a deep breath, and allow me to guide you through the shadows and radiance of a past that, though distant, still whispers lessons for our time. The medieval court was not just a stage for majesty, feast, and strategy, but a fertile ground where human desires, sometimes dark and uncontrolled, wove complex webs of consequences that went far beyond the private, touching the heart of politics, survival, and legacy. Imagine an ordinary day where the king or queen, besides ruling a kingdom, faces invisible battles within themselves. Power, with all its glory, also brings with it temptations capable of deflecting even the strongest minds. Amid whispers and veiled promises, alliances are forged on silent night, and secrets hidden behind locked doors carry the weight of choices that can change destiny. But these indulgences, though they offered momentary relief and pleasure, came at a price. The court, a microcosm of absolute power, did not forgive lapses. Scandals, once revealed, shook not only an individual's reputation, but also the political stability of an entire dynasty. Betrayals, adulteries, and behavior considered immoral were weapons in the hands of enemies and sources of incessant intrigue. Consider the profound impact a forbidden relationship could have. A royal mistress, a sexual conspiracy, could trigger wars, imprisonment, and even assassination. The rigid morality of the time, combined with the need to maintain order and respect, made any deviation a huge risk. And yet, despite the danger, the pursuit of pleasure and power seemed irresistible to many. These situations created a dangerous dance, where every move needed to be precisely calculated. Trust was a rare commodity, and betrayal a constant companion. The price of perversion was paid not only in kept secret, but in destroyed lives and legacy. Fame could turn to infamy, and glory to ruin. Hearing this, imagine the conflicting emotions that coursed through the hearts of those involved: the fear of discovery, the excitement of the forbidden, the pain of loss. This human duality, so present in our modern life, was amplified in the context of absolute power, where everything could be lost in an instant. As you let yourself be drawn into this narrative, feel the gentleness of the words as an invitation to reflect on the complexity of human being, their strengths and weaknesses. Allow the calm rhythm and the quiet voice to guide you through these stories of glory and decay, of choices and consequences, which, despite the passage of time, still resonate powerfully. When thinking of the most notorious kings of the Middle Ages, it's not difficult to imagine faces marked by authority, intertwined stories of power and scandals spanning centuries. These men, whose decisions shaped territories and peace, lived complex and sometimes contradictory lives, where glory and perversion walked side by side, weaving narratives that fascinate us to this day. Allow yourself now to travel with me through the corridors of time, feeling the heavy and intriguing atmosphere of these courts, where each step could mean a new secret revealed, a new alliance, or a betrayal. Imagine yourself before the throne, observing a king not just as a symbol, but as a man of flesh, blood, desires, and weakness. Let's begin with a man whose name still echoes with mystery and controversy, Henry VIII of England. This monarch, known for his multiple wives and decisions that changed the religious and political history of his country, lived a life marked by intense passions and drastic decisions. His search for a legitimate heir led him to break with the Catholic Church, creating the Anglican Church and unleashing a series of events that forever changed the European landscape. However, beyond his political decisions, Henry VIII was known for his personal excesses, lavish parties, mistresses, and a life of luxury that contrasted with the harshness of the people he ruled. His decisions about marriage, often based on whims and desires, had profound consequences, including the execution of some of his wives. In a time when royal power was absolute and justice was often arbitrary. Now, imagine the scene, the sound of footsteps echoing through the halls of Hampton Court, the murmurs of courtiers, the palpable tension between those who feared the king's wrath and those who sought his favor. Henry VIII's life was a constant drama, where the throne was as unstable as the monarch's own feeling. Another emblematic example is Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, whose life of luxury and absolute control over the kingdom symbolizes the height of monarchical absolutism. His court at Versailles was a spectacle of power and opulence, where strict etiquette and political gamesmanship blended with a life of excess that included endless parties, complicated relationships, and a cult of personal image. Louis XIV used luxury and pomp, political tools, controlling nobles and keeping them under constant surveillance. But he also indulged in forbidden pleasures, sometimes in secret. This mixture of power and perversion was part of the daily life of a man who knew his image was as important as his government, and that social control involved keeping all eyes on him. As you let these images take hold, imagine the corridors of Versailles, the clinking of glasses, the whispers and glances that betrayed alliances and rivalry, and the constant presence of a king whose private life was as complex as his kingdom was vast. Finally, it's worth remembering the enigmatic Caligula, a Roman emperor whose reputation for excess and perversion has endured through the age. Even though his story predates the Middle Ages, it often serves as a reference for later kings. Known for his extravagance, cruelty, and unpredictable behavior, Caligula personifies the explosive combination of absolute power and personal loss of control. His actions, which included orgiastic parties, absurd political decisions, and excess violence, reflect a dark side of power that to this day causes us astonishment and reflection on the limits of human authority. Imagine yourself in the imperial palace, where reality blends with delirium, and where the emperor's life was a spectacle of excess that simultaneously terrified and fascinated. These stories, filled with human details, mistakes, passions, and consequence, are an invitation to look beyond the myths and understand the complexity of those who rule, remembering that behind the crowns were people with their lights and shadow. Sit comfortably, gently close your eyes, take a deep breath. Let the words of this journey transport you to a time so distant and yet so vivid that it seems almost tangible. Imagine yourself, for a moment, walking through the shadows of centuries, where sunlight mingles with the crackling of torches, and with each step echoes the story of those who lived before us. On this journey, I ask you to suspend any judgment or modern thinking, for what we will explore is a raw, complex, and nuanced reality. Imagine what it would be like to live in a time where comfort was a luxury for the few, hope a dim flame, and certainties as rare as gold. Imagine an ordinary morning, not in the blandness of your daily routine, but amid the biting cold of a medieval castle, where the stone walls seem to guard ancient secrets and sounds are muffled by the weight of silence. The air is heavy, permeated by the smell of fire, burning wood, accumulated sweat, and strong perfumes used to mask natural odors, in a constant dance between pleasant and unpleasant. Now, feel the rough feel of the fabrics that clothe the inhabitants of that world, heavy garments made of wool and linen, barely protecting against the cold, and imagine the weight of these garments on your tired body, each movement demanding effort, each step a resistance against the harshness of the day. As you walk these corridors, think about what power was like back then, a crown that weighed not just on the head, but on the soul, decisions that could mean life or death, games of alliances where one mistake could cost everything. Picture the faces of the people who lived there, their gazes filled with hope, fear, pride, sometimes loneliness. Round him, the world didn't know the comforts we take for granted today. Hygiene was poor, invisible diseases stalked hospital beds, and medicine was still a mystery shrouded in superstition. Imagine the daily battles against these silent enemies, the strength needed to carry on despite suffering and uncertainty. At court, luxury and opulence contrasted with decadence and excess. Exuberant parties hid dark secrets, elegant smiles disguised deep intrigue. The pursuit of pleasure sometimes led to devastating consequences, both personal and... Imagine the dilemma of these kings and nobles, torn between their public image and private desires, navigating a life where everything could be lost in an instant. Now, reflect on the women who inhabited this universe, often subjugated, but also skilled in their silent resistance. They played the delicate and vital role of maintaining alliance, protecting their family, and sometimes influencing the fate of kingdoms. Imagine the strength that hid behind their apparent delicacy, the smiles that conceal secrets, and the tears few saw. As you absorb this scene, allow the calm of the narrative to envelop your senses. The soft sound of the voice is like a whisper that pierces time, guiding you into the story, inviting empathy and contemplation. It's not just about observing the past, but about feeling the humanity that connects us to it. At this moment, consider the lessons this past offers, how strength can be accompanied by weakness, how power can corrupt and yet create, how life is full of complexities and contradictions that we transcend and carry with us. This reflection is not only about those who lived centuries ago, but about ourselves today. Imagine, finally, that you are there, living through that time with its limitations, its challenges, its beauty, and its pain. Let that feeling wash over you like a gentle breeze, calming your mind and heart, while the stories continue to unfold, ready to reveal their secrets to those with the patience to listen. When I reflect on all we've experienced on this journey through the centuries and the hidden secrets of medieval courts, I'm overcome with a profound sense of reverence. Reverence for those who lived in such distinct times, facing challenges we can only imagine today, and also for us, who have the opportunity to hear their stories and learn from them, lulled by the calm that only reflection brings. Along this path, we've walked cold corridors, felt the weight of crowns and the shadows that hide behind the glitter of jewels, met faces marked by strength and fragility, and understood that power, in its purest form, is both light and darkness. And now, as the words gently glide and the voice soothes, I invite you to join me in this final moment of shared silence. It's curious how history can be so vivid in its detail, how the lives of kings and queens, of ordinary men and women, intertwine in a tapestry of choices, mistakes, loves. They weren't just distant characters, but people with beating hearts, dreams, and fears, navigating a sea of uncertainty and desire. And it is in this recognition of humanity that we find the beauty of history. As you remain here, enveloped by the gentleness of the narrative, reflect with me on the importance of looking at the past with eyes of understanding and compassion. For it is through this connection that we can not only learn, but also find peace and strength for our own paths. Medieval life, with its lights and shadows, reminds us that complexity is an essential part of being human, that even in difficult times there is room for hope, that stories of perversion and power are also stories of resistance and transformation, and that each of us carries within us a bit of these ancient narratives. Now, I invite you to join this conversation that transcends time. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening. What part of this story touched you most, or what you'd like to know more about? Your voice matters, and together we can continue exploring these mysteries with respect and peace of mind. If you enjoyed embarking on this journey with me, feel free to like and subscribe, so you don't miss the next stories that will arrive, always with that serene tone, that rhythm that helps calm the mind and open the heart. And before we say goodbye for now, remember, history isn't just what happened, but what we felt and took with us from it. May these words accompany you in moments of rest. May they be a gentle embrace, an invitation to dream and contemplation. Thank you for being here, for sharing this calm with me. Until the next story, until the next breath of the past that comes to teach us about the present.